All right, welcome back again, Hard Rockers. Had a lot of fun yesterday doing that first book review, and that was chapter 5, Rhymes with Rockin', which of course kind of showed us all the disastrous bad beginnings of Dawkins' existence as a band. Very interesting stuff. I don't know how much of that a lot of people were aware of. I certainly wasn't. Certain things, bits and pieces here and there, yeah, but to get it straight from the guys' mouths through these interviews in this book, pretty amazing stuff. And we're going to have another chapter like that today, which we'll talk about. Well, it's called Chapter 24. I broke Nikki's nose. I broke Tommy's nose. I punched poor Mick just for the heck of it. And let's get into it, shall we? All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and this is basically got to do with Motley Crue's tour with Ozzy Osbourne in '83 and '84 a little bit. Ozzy's Bark at the Moon tour, Motley's Shout at the Devil tour, obviously. And if you were alive and into hard rock and metal back then, and you were looking at the magazines that came out around that time, you had a pretty good idea that there was some legendary crap happening on that tour. And so this is a little bit about that, because I can't do this whole book. I would feel horrible about doing that. I don't think that's fair to the guys who wrote it. I want you guys to buy it, not because I have any sort of deal with the writers or the company or anything like that, but just because when I opened it up, I was like, oh my God, you're kidding. All this stuff that I've always wanted to know, it's basically right here. And I got this copy from the library because I wanted to see, how I felt about it before I flopped down 20 bucks or whatever. I'm going to flop down the 20 bucks because this is awesome. So anyway, if you're interested in that too, here's a little more. I'm going to give you 2, 3, 4, 5 more samples from this, just so you can sort of have a better idea of what types of different things it covers. Anyway, let's get on with chapter 24. Pardon my beer drinking. And again, chapter 24. I broke Nikki's nose. I broke Tommy's nose. I punched poor Mick just for the heck of it. All right. So Mike Bone. Shout at the Devil was selling like gangbusters. I was the head of promotion at Elektra, and the guy who was my predecessor was this guy named Lou. One day, Lou comes into my office and he goes, "Hey, Bone, look at this. This Motley Crue record just clicked past 500,000. We've got a gold record here. We should go and show this to the band." I said, "Yeah, they're out on the road." They were in Birmingham, New York. Doc McGee and had them opening for Ozzy. Fred Saunders, tour security for Motley Crue and Bon Jovi. Because they were the opener, it was absolutely crazy. They're on for 45 minutes and that's it. The rest of the 23 hours and 15 minutes of the day, they wore me out just trying to keep an eye on them. But they did a lot of in-stores, a lot of promotional stuff. They worked a lot. Brad Hunt. The in-stores were nuts. One of them, I think it was a record town, and by the time we got there, the line was out of the mall. It's snowing like a mofo, and these girls are standing there in torn sweatshirts in the snow because, quite frankly, one of the big things at a Motley Crue in store, aside from buying the record and getting it signed, was to get your breasts signed. Mike Bone. That night we were in Birmingham. They were staying at some cheap motel, a Ramada Inn or something like that. And because we were the opening act, we got back to the motel relatively early. There was a restaurant there, and Lou and I were going to have a beer with the band and then get in our car and head back to the city. So we're having a drink, and while we're doing this, buses are pulling up to the hotel and they're dropping off all these ski people in their ski outfits who are coming from New York up to Binghamton, Binghamton. So now on one side of the room are the ski people with their knitted caps and everything. And on the other side is Motley Crue and the road crew and some groupies. And Vince has this girl at the bar. This is not for children, by the way. If you have any around, might want to watch this later without them. Vince has this girl at the bar, and he takes her underwear off, and let's just put it this way. He used a long neck beer bottle on her in the restaurant in full view of everyone, including the skiers. This girl's friend was right there with her as this was going on, and she says, "I can't believe you're letting him do this to you." And the girl looks at her friend and she goes, "I'm with Vince Neil of the Motley Crue." I'm like, oh boy, let me finish my beer and get out of here. Doc McGee. Listen, Motley Crue was this band that every day you apologize. It wasn't like, oh, gee, that's a surprise. Fred Saunders. When Doc McGee offered me the job of security director, he said, "These guys are so wild, they need to be put in check." In fact, jokingly, he said, "I'll give you a bonus if you've got to hurt them." I said, "You got yourself a deal." Doc McGee. Fred was a great security guard, but he needed a security guard after 10 o'clock at night. He turned into one of the dark angels as well. Fred Saunders. Shit, let's see here. Vince, I beat up many times. I broke Nikki's nose. I broke Tommy's nose. I punched poor Mick just for the heck of it. Sharon Osbourne. Ozzy and Motley together was just insanity. Ozzy Osbourne. It was a band of lunatics on the road because they were just breaking through to a new audience. It was after the show that the mayhem started. Sharon Osbourne. It was a fuck fest. It was insane. Ozzy pissing on fucking cop cars and not realizing it's a cop car, you know, all of those things. Fred Saunders. I can remember Ozzy climbing up over my balcony and coming into my hotel room with just a bathrobe on. And I was on the 10th floor. I remember the guys jumping into pools with their clothes on, standing there pissing in the pool. It was goofy stuff, you know? Just some guys trying to outdo each other. Nikki Sixx. Ozzy is one of the sweetest men I've ever met. But when Sharon wasn't around, it was like a 5-person gang. It was always like, he topped us again. Sharon Osbourne. The guys in Motley Crue, I was like Debbie Downer because I would always try to get Ozzy away from them. Carmen Appice, or Appice. I can't remember which brother pronounces it which way. You'll have to forgive me. Anyway, he played drums for Ozzy on the Bark of the Moon tour, as most people know. Sharon wouldn't allow anyone backstage. So Motley Crue, they used to draw pictures of a limp penis and call it the No Fun Tour because, you know, they're young, they're vibrant, They're ready to screw anything that walked and drink and do drugs and have a great time. Sharon, I was like, one of you guys is going to die and it ain't going to be my husband. Mick Mars, I remember Ozzy just had his daughter, Amy, and I remember seeing her as a tiny, tiny little baby. Sharon had just had that kid when we were doing that tour, but Ozzy was still fucking up everywhere. He'd come up to our bus singing Iron Man, but he was singing I am Crelly Man. And he'd have about half an ounce of cocaine in a baggie, and he'd come on the bus and cut out a bunch of cocaine lines and stuff. We called them Texas Power Rails. And the next thing that I know is I was going to my room, the other guys went to the pool, Nikki pissed, and Ozzy snorted. Ozzy started snorting ants. Jake E. Lee. I was there for the whole snorting of the ants thing. I think my version's a little bit different than anybody else's, but I was also the only guy that wasn't drunk. I'll just tell you the way I remember it. We're at the hotel swimming pool during the day, and Ozzy was there bragging about how fit he was getting because my martial arts instructor was out on tour with us as Ozzy's bodyguard and trainer. And I think it was Nikki who said, yeah, how many push-ups can you do? And so they had a push-up contest. Ozzy did about 3, I think. Then they had a sit-up contest. Ozzy lost that too. Then Nikki said, well, let's change the rules. And Nikki was out there with a girl he had just met the night before. She was lounging in the sun, and Nikki pulls his dick out and starts pissing. She didn't like it. She ran off. It was getting weird because there were families out there at the pool. Ozzy Osbourne. We would try to out crazy each other. Why? I can't remember. Jake E. Lee. Then Ozzy was sitting on the concrete and we were looking at him to see what he was going to do. And he had this funny look on his face. And that's when I could see that he was pissing in his trunks while he was sitting down. There's this pool of piss forming around him. And because he was, quote unquote, in physical training, he must have been taking a lot of vitamins because I remember this piss was almost fluorescent. So Nikki's kind of looking at him like, I don't know if that beats me. And then Ozzy got on his hands and knees and started licking his piss up. That's when I gathered my things and I said, okay, I'm out. And as I was walking away, I saw him snorting something on the ground, which I assume was the line of ants. If they did anything after that, I don't know, and I kind of don't want to. Sharon Osbourne. A lot of it has obviously been exaggerated, but it was nothing new to me. It was like, been there, done that, move on, kids. I was brought up at a time where there were real gangsters in the music industry, and people had guns, and artists had guns, and it was a much tougher business. I'd been around all of that and all the groupies and all the insane behavior. So it did nothing to me. It was just like, oh, fuck off. I was just trying to keep my husband alive. Doc McGee. If we went to a nice hotel, which never happened in the first 5 years, I mean, we never were able to stay in anything but a Howard Johnson. We had to pay out cash. Otherwise, they wouldn't even let us stay in the hotel because the Motley guys were funny guys. They didn't do stuff that was malicious, but they would trash stuff and not say anything, and then we'd get the bill afterwards. I would always say, hey, if you smash something, you have to tell us before you leave. Otherwise, you have to pay double for it. So then I'd be getting calls at 3 o'clock in the morning from 6. Put me down for a TV. Put me down for a lamp. Brad Hunt. I mean, the scenes in hotels were pretty wild. You learned after a point to try not to stay on their floor. Ozzy. Motley Crue were a force to be reckoned with back then. They were the heavy version of the glam rock kind of deal. Jake. But I don't think Ozzy was worried about it. Ozzy knew he was Ozzy. And all of the opening bands, Motley, Rat, shit, even Metallica opened for a while, pretty much worshipped Ozzy. I don't think he looked at them as any kind of competition. Fred Saunders. As far as Motley were concerned, it was Ozzy's show. But in reality, you look at the merchandise and it was Motley Crue who were selling. Motley merchandise was like $12 a head at the time. It was amazing. Jake E. Lee. The arenas were always full when Motley went on. Nobody wanted to miss them. They had a great audience reaction. And definitely a lot more girls were interested in meeting Motley Crue after the show than they were in coming to the Ozzy bus. You could tell they were going to be huge. Carmen Appice. When those guys went on tour with us, they were on fire. They were out to kill. Brad Hunt. They partied hard. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But they were really hard workers. Mike Bone. The Crue, for all the stories, and God knows there's plenty of stories about them, it did not make a fucking difference. If you told them to be in the lobby at 7:30 a.m., they were there at 7:25. If they had to go do a morning show at some rock radio station in order to sell tickets, they'd ride through the night and park their bus in the station parking lot and go in and rev up the morning DJs. Brad Hunt. I remember every jock would say, "You can't swear on the radio." And of course, within the first seconds of the interview, inevitably a fuck would come out of one of their mouths. But everybody loved them. I mean, what was not to love? They were fun on the air. They were a great interview. They were terrific. Ozzy. I was well established, but Motley Crue were coming up fast. It was a good package, but it was one of the most dangerous tours I ever did. I said that to Doc one day. It's getting so crazy. Doc McGee. I don't think there was anyone in Motley Crue that went, if we do this, that's going to be cool and people are going to, you know what I mean? These guys weren't bad guys and they didn't do it to be rock stars. They did it because that's what they did. Okay, so that's 24. That's chapter 24 here. And that's the entire chapter. The next one after that, chapter 25, is called I Believe Our Bus Got Crabbed Out. That sounds promising. Okay, so for the next video, I'm going to talk about a chapter that is all about the sort of back and forth switcheroos between guys like George Lynch, Warren DeMartini, Jake E. Lee in all the different bands at the time in the early LA scene. And I've already read that chapter before I did this just now, and I was like, oh my God, this is so what I've always sort of wondered about and what I've been looking for. So that's going to be tomorrow's video. Again, if you wouldn't mind, let me know what you think. If you're enjoying this down in the comments, that would be really helpful. I mean, if you're not enjoying it, there's no purpose in me doing it. I'll just read the book and not worry about that too much. But anyway, this next one is absolutely fascinating to me. It talks about the whole George auditioning for Ozzy and then Jake getting the gig thing. It talks about how while George was gone with Ozzy during that period, Warren somehow went from Rat to Dokken temporarily. And then George came back and went to Rat. In the meantime, Jake's now left Rat. He's been with Rough Cut for a while. He's in Ozzy. There's just all this movement going on, and all these guys knew each other and knew each other well. Jake is the one who suggested Warren to Rat, talked him into coming up from San Diego to LA, let Warren stay with him and his wife for about a month and taught him the Rat songs on the guitar, you know, and everything. It's just amazing. It's a great chapter. I really recommend showing up for that one tomorrow. All right, guys, I'm out of here. Let me know what you thought of this one. I thought this one was a lot of fun. I could have laughed a lot more if I wasn't trying to read. All right, out.